The summer after my senior year of college, my best friend Curtis and I had a pretty normal idea. Get in a car and drive across the country.
When you're 22 and on the road, you're supposed to feel like you have your whole life ahead of you. But we'd just heard some rather disconcerting news. Someday, we were going to die. And maybe sooner than we thought. For the first time in American history, our generation was at risk of having a shorter lifespan than our parents. And it was because of what we ate.
With diet-related diseases like diabetes, obesity, and heart failure at epidemic levels, we were more than curious to know, just what was it that we were putting into our bodies?
We're late.
Let me figure out here. You're Ian.
Yes.
I'm looking at your hair. And Kurt.
Yeah.
So hair is a continuous recorder. It's a tape recorder of diet. And so do this hamburger that becomes part of my diet will eventually find its way into my hair.
There it is. There it is. You got big red.
All right. Well, I've analyzed your hair, and the real conclusion is that the carbon in your bodies really originates from corn.
And corn.
When I'm talking about corn, I'm not talking about corn on the cob, sweet corn. I'm talking about the corn that's being used as a material that's going into the foods that we use ubiquitously. The apple juices and the grape juices that are canned and they say sweet, that's going to be a high fructose corn syrup. And then you look down the meats, beefs, porks, chickens. You feed them corn and that gets turned into their biomass that we consume. And you walk down the cookie aisle.
Cornstarch, corn gluten meal, hydrolyzed corn protein,
Corn syrup, corn starch, corn syrup solids,
cornstarch,
Hydrolyzed corn protein.
high fructose corn syrup,
corn king bacon.
For Americans that I've run the isotope analysis on, those numbers are showing this huge weight of the influence of corn.
Mr. Charles Pyatt, 2637 Floyd Line Street, Green, Iowa, 50636. Dear Mr. Pyatt, I hope December finds you well. We got your name from a Corn Growers Association. They suggested you were the kind of guy who might be willing to help us out with a rather unusual idea. We recently learned that people who grew up eating the way we did are basically made out of corn. What the heck? We're writing with a strange proposal. We want to move to Iowa and plant a single acre of corn on your land. We don't know a thing about corn. Seems like a good time to find out. Sincerely, Ian Cheney and Curtis Ellis.
Boston to Iowa. Yeah, I'm going to grow an acre of corn and see what happens with it.
Like most young people who had grown up in cities, we knew very little about farming.
Can I have the biscuits with gravy?
But if it was true a lot of our food came from corn, there was a good chance it came from Iowa, right in the middle of the American heartland.
Well, my dad bought this farm back in the Depression, back in 36, I think. My grandparents lived on the next one down east over here, and they moved in there in 1900.
Is it always this cold?
Well, sometimes it gets chillier. This is cold. That's what it looks like.
Where do you think our acre ought to be?
Right out in here, and
How big's an acre?
an acre, a half, I guess probably about 8 rows here,
Okay.
something like that. Would make all the way through as far as you can see. 8 rows would make an acre.
An ideal place to grow the corn crop with all of its requirements and all of its characteristics. You would design something that looked very much like Iowa.
Ricardo Salvador is an agronomist at Iowa State University. He agreed to show us the plant we would be growing.
So what you're looking at here is a grass plant. So it's a very close relative in exactly the same family as the stuff that you have growing in your lawn. This is obviously a gigantic version of those grasses.
Our 1 acre lawn would be growing a giant grass, whose ancestors looked very different. Native corn originated in southern Mexico, but found a happy home in Iowa, a land of fertile soils and humid summers. Gradually, one type of corn replaced all the others, a versatile crop named Yellow Dent No. 2, which over time came to dominate the entire middle of the country.
The farmer's cooperative elevator is a very significant part of our economy
Why is it called an elevator?
because you had to have some form of an elevator shaft or whatever to get the corn back up in so they could store it.
What is this here?
That's excess corn. That's our overage of corn this year. The elevator's full.
So does this just get thrown out, or?
No, that'll all be shipped out this spring.
But that's what couldn't fit in that huge thing.
That's right.
Does that happen every year?
Well, it has the last few years.
It was going to be a long time before we could do anything we'd thought of as farming. But on the modern farm, you don't have to wait for the snow to melt before you can get to work. This looks like good.
The first thing you should really understand is what the farm program is. And it's a very complicated program we have now.
Okay, so you got corn, you got 1 acre, here's your base.
Well, here we've got a chart that shows that the direct payment on corn is going to be 28 cents
Payment from
from the U.S. government. Whether you like it or not, it's part of growing corn.
Did or will you plant or produce an agricultural commodity on land for which a highly erodible determination has not been made?
$29. So you're going to get 14 now, and you'll get 14 in October.
I don't know of a single farm out here that isn't in the government program. I'll guarantee you, if you go out and just raise an acre of corn without any government payments, you're going to lose money.
Really?
Definitely.
Just for moving to green and telling the government we were going to plant an acre of corn, we were going to get $28. And the more corn you grow, the more money you get.
Around the world, farm subsidies have long been used to keep prices high and farmers in business. But in 1973, the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, Earl L. Butz, created a new kind of subsidy with a very different goal.
What we want out of agriculture is plenty of food, and that's our drive now. We have experienced a 180-degree turn in the philosophy of our farm programs. We've abandoned the long-time philosophy of curtailment and cutback to the new philosophy of expansion. And it makes sense.
What do corn growers really want? More corn. Way, way more corn. Go where no one's gone before. More corn. That's more like it. Comprised of 4 separate registered products.
Kurt Ellis.
Hey, Ian Cheney. Hi, Ian. Al Marth.
How you doing?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Good.
What can I help you with today?
Fertilizer.
Fertilizer. Okay. What kind of ground are you guys working on? Is it a sandier type soil?
I haven't
or
done any analysis of it. So it's a basic brown.
Okay. Essentially, the crop needs nutrients to in order to produce the maximum yield, and you want to have the biggest potential out there to get the biggest yield you can. Past couple of years, we've had probably 200 bushel corn around here, and we like that a lot. So, staying right in this area, you'll probably get a good smell of the ammonia.
Oh yeah, I get it.
Hey, if you like.
Any advice for driving with this thing?
Yeah, don't hit anything. That's a bad thing.
Okay, we know that there's 43,560 square feet in an acre. And we're going to try to mark out 1 acre for corn.
So I push this forward?
Yeah, push it forward.
Terrified. All right, we're up. Are you kidding?
Simply by injecting 150 pounds of anhydrous ammonia, we were likely to get 4 times as much corn as our great-grandparents could have gotten from the same piece of land.
Well, you want to go another round?
On almost every farm, there was a tank of ammonia fertilizer. And it seemed to be working. Elevators were full in almost every town we saw. In fact, they were a lot more than full.
That was fun.
The corn we were going to plant on our acre was the latest in modern agricultural technology. It had been hybridized, genetically modified, and treated with a very colorful fungicide.
What you're growing is an industrialized corn. It has been changed over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years with one goal in mind, which is yield. The way it was done was not to make every plant produce more so much as to make the plants tolerate living close together. This plant is kind of an urban creature. It lives in these cities of corn. We are now up to close to 200 bushels of corn per acre. This is what, 10,000 pounds? 5 tons of food from 1 acre of land. It's an amazing amount of food.
How about boom?
Curtis and I are going to do a taste test on our corn to see how it's coming along, to see how it's tasting.
It looks good.
It looks great.
It's not very good, Ian.
Yeah.
Tastes like soda.
I think that looks like a nice corn porridge. Yeah, it's disgusting. It tastes like chalk.
I really thought it would taste better. Tastes like crap.
If you're standing in a field in Iowa, there's an immense amount of food being grown, none of it edible. The commodity corn, nobody can eat. It must be processed before we can eat it. It's a raw material, it's a feedstock for all these other processes. And the irony is that an Iowa farmer can no longer feed himself.
When we harvest our corn in the fall, its first step toward being processed into food will be a 7.5-mile ride down the road to the town elevator.
So in the fall, when you do harvest your acre of corn, it'll come into the elevator here where we'll pull across a scale, weigh your truck or wagon, and then it will be pulled across to the dump pit where it'll be dumped in with a bunch of other corn. Your acre of corn is impossible to track just because of the sheer volume that we deal with.
We were still months away from harvest, but our work on the farm was basically done. It was already clear that when the time came to say goodbye to the corn from our acre, we would never know exactly where it would end up.
After the crop is delivered to the elevator, following corn into the food system becomes a game of probabilities. Of the 10,000 pounds of corn our acre is likely to produce, 32% will be either exported or turned into ethanol, in neither case ending up in our food or in our hair.
Ethanol.
But 490 pounds will become sweeteners, like high fructose corn syrup, and more than half our crop, a full 5,500 pounds, will be fed to animals to become meat. So while our corn matured in the field, we decided to look into its eventual fate and try to go where corn goes.
Kurt, nice to meet you. I'm Bob Bledsoe.
Ian Cheney.
Ian, nice to meet you. Our operation is that we buy calves and we bring them into the feedlot and feed them for 140, 150 days here and then sell them to the packing plant as fed cattle. Basically, 14 to 16,000 head are finished here. We don't like being big, but right now you're looking at a family farm in Yuma County, Colorado.
We were still getting used to the new look of the family farm. But the farms in Colorado did have one major thing in common with the farms we'd seen in Iowa.
We're a cattle company, but we do grow a lot of corn. About 7,000 acres every year. And it is all used for animal feed.
The grasslands of the American West, where cattle traditionally grazed, have become some of the biggest corn farms in the country. corn has replaced grass as the principal feed for cattle.
The mass production of corn drives the mass production of animal protein in confined operations. And you got to have cheap feed to do the confinements.
That's my brand. I just sold these to the feedlot in March. You know, I really don't have many other alternatives.
At Sue Jarrett's cow-calf operation, we saw how cattle are raised before they go to the feedlot, eating grass on the open range. When Sue's father ran the ranch, cattle spent almost all their lives eating grass, and it took several years to reach market weight. But in recent years, cattle have begun spending more and more of their lives in feedlots.
They put on weight faster if you don't let them move. So total confinement, less space for movement. They eat continually, and you get them into the market, into the food chain. But cattle were not meant to be on a corn-fed diet for that long. You know, we used to feed them 60, 90 days was one thing. Up to 120, you could make it. You start really pushing cattle on a corn-based diet after that, the ulcers and the stomachs don't take it well, and they start getting sick.
So this is just a hole in the stomach here?
Scientists researching the effects of feeding corn to cattle have developed a method of looking into their actual stomachs during digestion.
It's very warm and it's pretty packed in there.
100 years ago, most cattle probably were fed grass, hay, and they were out grazing. We've gone from really feeding no grain to rations now that contain up to 90% grain. But these animals evolved not in feeding these high starch or things like corn. You feed a lot of corn, more acid's produced, and the animal can get into trouble. Corn in this environment produces these acids, the pH drops, and then they succumb to a condition we call acidosis. And if it's not treated, the animal dies.
The corn fed to cattle is supplemented with low doses of antibiotics that help them combat acidosis. Livestock now consumes 70% of the antibiotics in the United States. But antibiotics also help cattle survive the conditions of confinement. This facility, with more than 100,000 head of cattle, produces as much waste as a city of 1.7 million people.
A lot of people look at these large feedlots now and question whether that's what we should be doing. But the reason that it's done, it's economic. And because of the yields on corn and the amount produced and the efficiency of producing corn, it's lower cost per unit of usable energy to the animal.
The meat that we eat in this day and age is produced in a feedlot. It's grain-fed meat. And we produce a characteristically obese animal, an animal whose muscle tissue looks more like fat tissue than it does lean meat in wild animals. And if you look at a T-bone steak from a grain-fed cow, it may have as much as 9 grams of saturated fat, whereas a comparable steak from a grass-fed animal would have 1.3 grams of saturated fat. And so this is the meat that we eat in America. America's favorite meat is ground beef, hamburger meat.
Could I have the bacon cheeseburger?
Okay.
And hamburger meat is really not meat, but it's rather fat disguised as meat. It contains 65% of its calories by energy as fat.
Oh my God.
It was starting to make a lot of sense why Kurt and I had found corn in our hair. America's favorite meat happened to be our favorite too. Burgers made from corn-fed beef are cheap and easy to find. In fact, if you were born in the last 30 years in America, chances are you've only ever tasted corn-fed beef.
When we got back to Iowa, it was good to see our acre again. But it was hard to feel that we'd planted anything unique. American farmers were growing more than 13 billion bushels of corn.
Yeah, look at that.
A number that had been increasing since the 1970s.
After decades of subsidy programs and all these incredible regulations on what farmers could grow and how much and where, the government was saying, it's all over. Grow your operation. You've got to plant more land, plant fence row to fence row, boys, and buy out your neighbor if he's not willing to grow. And when we had so much surplus corn and there was such an interest in trying to derive the maximum benefit out of it, investment was made to develop this corn sweetener industry.
I was wondering whether it's possible to make high fructose corn syrup in my home. Alright, so step one apparently is soaking this corn in water that has been heated to 140 degrees. And we're also supposed to put in sulfuric acid at 200 parts per million, which is a tiny parts per gallon.
0.0007.
So 7 it's not even close to a teaspoon. It's like you're gonna stick your finger in and whatever drop sticks to it.
No, man. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do that.
It's so much easier.
What we're looking for is yellow dent number 2. So it's already a certain type of corn that will yield a lot of starch.
Well, this is going to soak for 16 hours to get it soft and begin to separate the starch from the fiber. All right, day 2.
Smells sweet.
What does some of your sweets smell like? Sugar?
Yes.
There's a lot of technology, quote unquote, that goes into making corn sweetener.
All right, step 2, physically damage the corn.
It doesn't look like a kernel anymore at the end of the process, but that is part of that innovative system.
The endoamylases, spezyme prime enzyme, randomly hydrolases alpha-1,4 glycosidic bonds to reduce the viscosity of a gelatinized starch.
Everything really is a science when you boil it down.
Wow. That's pretty sweet.
It's sweet.
It tastes good.
Hey, look at that.
Prior to about 1970, nobody ate high fructose corn syrup because it was too expensive to make. Today, the dominant sugar in the Western diet now comes from corn. Corn is very cheap, so it's beneficial for people that are making processed foods to sweeten their product with high fructose corn syrup because it costs them less and they save money.
Okay, Food and beverage manufacturers were looking for a lower cost sugar substitute. By the late 80s, we had fully taken over half of the sweetener market in the United States. High fructose corn syrup is known to enhance flavors of spices and fruits. It lessens the acidic quality of spaghetti sauces. It provides good browning properties to breads. It's all a part of a complex, innovative system that makes these foods available to us in such a variety of choices for such low prices.
Every single item I saw in this aisle contains corn syrup.
In the last 30 years, America's consumption of table sugar has fallen. But our overall consumption of sweeteners has gone up more than 30%, largely because of a dramatic increase in our consumption of high fructose corn syrup.
Everything we'd done on our acre since coming to Iowa had been designed to do one thing: grow as many bushels of corn as possible. What we hadn't realized was that what we were growing was essentially an acre of sugars.
We know some things just from the factual analytical standpoint about the corn which is grown in Iowa. It has been selected for high productivity. This means high volume starch production. Well, you never get something for nothing in the world of biophysics, and what you give up in the bargain is nutritional value.
Most of what we've done in agricultural so-called improvements and in food processing have actually degraded our food supply from a nutritional standpoint.
The corn that originally came north from Mexico was a grain with a higher protein content. But as corn was bred for higher productivity, the nature of the corn kernel was transformed.
What's happened is that increased yield has been mainly an expansion in the endosperm, or the starch fraction of the kernel of corn. And of course, now we're taking that starch and converting it to high fructose corn sweetener, which basically has no nutritional value, only adverse metabolic effects and empty calories.
For each kernel of our corn turned into high fructose corn syrup, there's a nearly 70% chance it will end up sweetening a beverage, likely headed for a big city far from the Corn Belt. In Brooklyn, New York, about 139 million gallons of soda are consumed each year, sweetened by 20,000 acres of corn.
Boruga, ¿cómo está Boruga? ¿Está lento la cosa o qué?
Así mero, así mero.
Yeah, right now we are at Fifth Avenue Park Slope, Brooklyn, New York.
We've been growing this acre of corn in Iowa and trying to figure out where the corn will go when it leaves our farm. And so we've been following the story of corn syrup.
Tell you what, just stopping into a bodega and buying a bottle of soda. It doesn't matter if it's a Pepsi or Coke or it doesn't matter. Any soda product contains corn syrup. I actually never thought that soda would be a large problem to drink, but I could show you a picture over here. The way I used to be, I used to weigh over 300 pounds. That's me right there. I was a size 60 in pants, and I stopped drinking soda, and just by not drinking soda, I lost about a third of what I weighed, you know.
We have an explosion of obesity. That's probably the most conspicuous symptom of the nutritional crisis occurring in America. But the obesity is only just part of it. High consumption of sweeteners like high fructose corn syrup has quite adverse metabolic effects. And what we see in our long-term studies is higher risk of type 2 diabetes as well.
Hi.
Kurt, Ellen.
Farida Khan. Nice to meet you.
Diabetes essentially means that your blood sugar level in the blood is higher than what your pancreas can control and keep in the normal range. 1 in 8 New Yorkers have diabetes, which either is diagnosed or they don't know if they have diabetes and they remain undiagnosed.
Like, it's not like any other disease that we have where we just give prescriptions and that's the end of it, because it's not something that goes away.
Diabetes is a disease and obesity is a disease which is strongly linked to the environmental factor of food and exercise. What is the cheaper food for people? Okay, I think cost has a lot to do what people buy. The cheaper food is really not a healthy food.
And the main thing is sodas. Soda is liquid candy. And people think they're quenching their thirst drinking a glass of soda, but there you have a big, amount of sugar that you're drinking.
In a recent analysis, we found that drinking 1 soda per day on average almost doubled the risk of type 2 diabetes compared to only occasionally having a soda beverage or not at all.
My dad, he had a pain in his toe for over 6 months, and he found out he was diabetic that way. And they cut his big toe off. And before my father died, it went from his toe to his foot to below the knee to above the knee, and then he wanted to start cutting on the other leg. My dad said no, that was enough, and he just gave up. My mom died of a direct result of diabetes. My grandmother died a direct result of diabetes. My sister Madeline, she's been a diabetic for years. I was recently diagnosed with diabetes. We don't think of what we're putting into our system. We don't really think about it.
By the end of September, we'd been corn farmers for almost 9 months. It was becoming clear that our acre wasn't just a game for seeing where food came from. We were growing an actual crop. It was destined to be eaten by actual people.
If you take that meal, you take that McDonald's meal, you don't realize it when you eat it, but you're eating corn. Beef has been corn-fed. Soda is corn. It's all high fructose corn syrup. That's the main ingredient. Even the French fries, which are, half the calories in the French fries come from the fat that they're fried in, and that fat is liable to be corn oil or soy oil. And so when you're at that McDonald's, you're eating Iowa food. Everything on your plate is corn.
How you doing?
Good, thanks.
Come on in.
Good.
Well, how are things going for you guys?
How did your crop come out then?
Well, we haven't harvested it yet, so we don't know how much
What the yield is.
And stuff. But it from as far as I can tell, it looks like everybody else's corn. So
Yeah, it's standing up.
it's standing up, and it's kind of yellow and hard. And I think our problem is figuring out what we want to do with it once we harvest it, because we've been out figuring out where it could go, and none of our options seem particularly attractive, and I'm not terribly impressed with.
And you shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Should be impressed at the stupidity. We aren't growing quality. We're growing crap. Poorest quality crap the world's ever seen. We're growing it today.
You don't eat the corn that you grow?
No.
Not saying that I might not grind up a little bit for some cornmeal, but I basically don't.
I don't necessarily grow my corn for food. I don't care what's done with it. I'm selling it. It's the bottom line.
You don't think we have enough corn?
We got lots of corn.
Two weeks before harvest, the price for a bushel of corn at the elevator was $1.65. We had spent $142 to rent the acre, and with $133.24 for seed and chemicals, and $74.68 to rent and run the equipment, our total costs added up to $349.92. But even if we got a huge yield, like 200 bushels, we would only get paid $330 from the elevator, a loss of $19.92. The government subsidy would be what made our farm profitable.
We happen to have a kind of subsidy system, and we haven't always had it, only for the last 30 years or so, that rewards the overproduction of cheap corn.
Corn is the crop we've spent the most money on over the past 10 years. And so we've got mountains of grain all over the Midwest because the subsidy programs keep the production going full blast.
All that cheap surplus corn goes somewhere, and in fact a lot of it's going on to our bodies.
There is a role that the subsidies have played in making the raw material available for an overweight society. We subsidize the Happy Meals, but we don't subsidize the healthy ones.
There's a very specific history to this. I mean, how we got to your acre in Iowa. You really do have to go back to Earl Butz and the revolution in farm policy that happens in the 1970s.
What we want out of agriculture is plenty of food, and that's our drive now. This year, 1973, we're going to see the most massive increase in production of farm products ever in the history of this country. And next year, we're going for a still further increase on top of that as we pull all stops.
Is he expecting you?
Got some corn on the door.
Dr. Butz, we've been making a film, and about a year we've spent growing an acre of corn.
Growing an acre of corn, huh?
Yes, sir.
Well, it's changed from the days when I was your age.
What part did you play in creating the food system that we have today?
When I was a youngster on the farm, we had these programs cutting back on production. We paid farmers not to produce. One of the stupidest things we ever did, I think. But they got paid for not producing instead of paid for producing. And when I became secretary, we stopped that system.
We've heard from some people that they think there is too much food. What do you think of that?
Well, that's the basis of our affluence now. The fact that we spend less on food. It's America's best kept secret. We feed ourselves with approximately 16 or 17% of our take-home pay. That's marvelous. That's a very small chunk to feed ourselves. And that includes all the meals we eat at restaurants, all the fancy doodads we get in our food system. I don't see much room for improvement there, which means we'll spend our surplus cash on something else.
Around the world, people spend far more of their earnings on food. In Ireland and Japan, food expenses take up more than 20% of disposable income. And in some parts of Africa, food costs are more than 2/3 of take-home pay.
Rural America has completely changed. But as a consequence, we feed ourselves very cheaply now. You'll see those tremendous fields of corn out there, corn as far as you can see. But that's the age of plenty.
It was Earl Butz's farm program that made our country's dream of plenty a reality. We spend less of our income on food than anyone else in the world. But we also might be the first generation for whom that abundance brings too much.
And I farmed all my life, practically. Personally, I don't like the looks of where we're headed, but maybe some people say there's no stopping it. I think we're going to look at industrialized agriculture. That's really what we're looking at now. Larger and larger operations all the time. Well, it's a cheap food policy, let's face it.
The corn we harvested from our 1 acre was enough to produce 57,000 cans of soda, or almost 4,000 corn-fed hamburgers. A total yield of almost 180 bushels. Our small part of the biggest corn harvest in American history.
You grew up here, right?
Yeah, I'm born right here in this room. It's all the farther I ever got in life.
We are wondering if there's any way you'd let us try and raise the money to actually buy that acre. And
you guys, you're going to starve this country.
See the farmer on the other side of town. He's always working till the sun goes down. Up every morning, right on 5, wanting green seeds to come alive. But he don't wear no farm clothes. He's always using a rake and hoe. But his seeds are starting to grow like a big stalk through the sky. He used to live in Apartment City with thick and priestly windows built right in it. But he's moved to a little tiny town. Wanna be a farmer all year round. And on a country road where you can't see a thing, he's got 5 acres filled with little green things. He said he's working so hard all